Hello, everyone. It is Kenyon here. It is Basketball Rewind, and guess what? We are not in the finals, but the finals is going on. If you just woke up from a coma, or if you decided to finally start watching basketball with Raptors again, well, I'm sorry, we're not in it right now. But the Mavs and Boston are. With that being said, it's not over yet. It's not over yet. We have a Mavs fan and beyond. We have Tyler Rucker joining us, who is representing the Boston Celtics. Coach and I are just innocent bystanders, hoping to, make sure that the fray doesn't go crazy. Yesterday was an insane game. Luka slapped down. No, I'm just kidding. It was good though. It was good. I don't have a tunnel fit or a tunnel walk. How are both of you feeling? Tyler, I'm going to start with you. Is there any sort of anxiety going into the next game and the rest of the series, or are you calm, cool, and collected, almost Joe Mazzulla style?
It's the anxiety's looming. Thank you guys for having me back on. I'm very honored, by the way. I should have started off with that. But then you got me distracted with, do I have anxiety? Because I was like, well, that's a heavy question this time of the year. With the finals, for sure, it's looming. I feel fine. I've calmed myself down. Like I was gonna be completely shocked if Boston really took care of business, just because it's so hard to close out teams. And Dallas, I was like, I'm waiting for the Kyrie Luka game, and Brian Windhorst going off on Luka. I was like, don't poke the bear right when the Celtics are about to close this, please. So I was like, Luka's gonna have a big night, and then he looked great in the first quarter, and I was like, yeah, they're in trouble. The Celtics looked like they had a lid on the hoop, and Dallas was just feeling good and finding good shots. So little anxiety moving forward. I've liked how Boston's responded this year, but just kind of their past of, it always seems like they struggle to get over the mountaintop. And until they do that, which I really want it to happen, so we can see if it's just this big weight or sigh of relief for this team. But until they do that, I'm not counting. I'm not counting my championship right now. I'm not getting ahead of it, because you got to win 4 to win the finals.
Smart man. You also have a few, in the back pocket to count already in the meantime to keep you busy. So,
yeah,
there is that.
Yeah. See, I'm like one of those, like I've rooted for the Celtics my whole life, but I'm also like, I wasn't alive for a lot of those. So I can't be like, yeah, well, we've got all these. I'm like, I've seen the Celtics have won 1 championship in my lifetime. So I'm not going to get cocky. And, people are like, you guys always win. I'm like, I wasn't alive when they won. So, I took the first one for granted.
So I have watched them win those ones in this case here. I have watched a gentleman named Larry Bird make my life miserable as a Pistons fan. Trust me. My favorite player is Isaiah Thomas. I need to say nothing more about how I feel about Boston, okay?
I grew up on those stories with Larry Bird. Like, I've watched all those games. Like, I basically didn't have a choice growing up, but it's just one of those, like, when your team wins it for the first time, you kind of almost like, oh, that was fantastic. Like, how can that happen again? And then you take it for granted. You're like, wait, I missed that. So now I'm like, I'm not getting too cocky, because I'm like, I know how hard it is to win in this league, and also to close out a team on the road. So it's going to be crazy. Now you guys are giving me more anxiety, because I'm getting nervous for the game while I'm talking about
it. Just breathe, man. Just breathe.
Exactly. Beyond, your thoughts?
Honestly, I'm going to start in a strange place, actually. Whatever happens in this series, Luka Doncic needs to go in that locker room and apologize to all the other 14 members of his team, including the coaching staff. Because the effort he actually put in on defense, in that 4th game, you're sitting here wondering, if you're a teammate, where has that been for the first 3? I'm not asking him to be Meta World Peace or Ron Artest, whichever way you want to go with in this case, his name. I'm just asking him to be competent. And it's like, just be at least give the guy a little friction. And finally, we see it. Now, for the positive in this case here, they played with force last night. They need to play with force throughout the rest of the series, how long it goes. The one thing I will say, I'm not saying it's going to likely happen. I think that Boston win the series. I'm a realist. I'm always a realist with you guys. You know that, man. Even my team, I'm a realist. However, there is one confluence of events that is possible, if it ever is going to be the case, is this one. And here's what I mean. When you have a team that plays with so much variance when it comes to three-point shooting, all right, where you could go hot as a hot knife through butter for 3 games. We saw it last year, and then go dead as a cold fish for the next 3 games. You play with fire in those certain circumstances. And then you throw in the fact on the other side of the ledger, you might have me potentially looking at an all-time great, right? That where all of a sudden it's like, oh, this isn't playing no disrespect. I'll take shots at my own team. This ain't the old four Pistons, right? When it comes to talent-wise, there's a couple dudes on here that if you keep messing around, one guy's already done it down 3-1. Okay, so you start messing around against the 3-2, things start getting interesting. That's all I'm saying. Because the way Boston plays is feast or famine a lot of times. Now, I will say this. There is one guy that got the memo, and I appreciate that he's the one guy that got the memo. That's Jaylen Brown. Because he's not quite playing like the rest of the guys from what the Boston system is. He's like, I'm trying to get the rack as much as possible. Okay, he's not trying. He's not settling, right? And I think all the other guys are still kind of playing what they want to play, and when it's not going right, it's like, oh, well. But Jaylen Brown is the one guy. If I'm a Boston guy, I would feel good in the sense that he is making sure I am not going to get into this routine of we just chucking up threes all day long. So we'll see. I must admit, as I said before, I'm a little more of a gray beard than the three of you guys here. This is a dynamic in Boston I have never quite seen the Boston Celtics, watching as a purveyor of the Celtics from afar. Usually Celtics, in this case, fans, for the most part, have always been like, oh, we'll take care of it. The leprechaun will take care of things. It'll just work out for us. And for the most part, for 40, 50 years, some strange event comes along, be it Magic Johnson loses his mind, or Isaiah Thomas just have to throw an inbound pass out of the blue. Bird comes to the way. I will go into the 60s and some of the stuff that happened with Jerry West. It just seems to always work out for Boston. However, in the last few years now, is a dynamic I have not seen with Boston fans and our well-esteemed guest here today has kind of exuded that, where I've never seen Celtics fans have anxiety before. I've seen Red Sox fans have anxiety. I've seen Bruins fans have anxiety. I've never seen Celtics fans have anxiety in my life until this era of Celtics basketball. It is a fascinating thing to watch because what is going to happen here if that game gets close to the fourth quarter? Something you did not hear in the old Boston Garden and rarely heard up to me about last 5-6 years ago. Anxiety in the building, which does not happen. It's only happened, I think, 2 times I can think of where I've heard Boston fans have anxiety in the glory years. One, when a guy in red and black was wearing 23, and another guy in this case wearing crimson and brown or blue or whatever he's wearing 23. That's the only 2 other times I've ever heard it. For teams per se, not really. So I am fascinated to see how this is going to play out on Monday night, because if this game's close to the fourth quarter, where it is, man, you just want to rotate, you want to be hanging around. if I'm still there with a possession or up by 2 possessions with the guys I got on my team, I'm feeling good. Like James Brown said, I'm feeling good, man. And I know in this case here, I might be starting to book some tickets back to South Texas. And I'm like, yo. Because I'm sitting there going like, guys, man. And then it gets really interesting at that point, right? Because then the talk starts happening. He's been able to skate so far. His man, he knows what I'm about to say. He's been able to skate so far. But then percentages have been pretty rough for Jason Tatum. Okay? And what I'm noticing with him, this isn't like, oh, I got the yips in the finals type of thing. To me, this is almost a systemic issue with him and his game. He has some troubles really working off the bounce and finishing around the hoop. And I'm curious as it gets tighter, what he's going to look like. We'll see. I'm not concerned about Jaylen Brown. I'm not concerned about Drew Holiday. Them dudes I'm not concerned about. Even to some extent, old Easy Al, he can be okay. But guys that I know about the past, like Tatum and Porzingis, we'll see. We'll see. So, and then you get the bench dudes like Pritchard and them dudes, they ain't never been these deep waters. They don't, so we'll see.
So I'll say this, and this is a great segue into part of our next segment where I'm going to actually ask Coach first, seeing all of these games, and you guys have probably seen a little bit more than me because I've just been a little bit busy recently, but I've watched as much as I have been able to. What is the takeaway that a lot of GMs are going to, because you mentioned something about Tatum. We're definitely going to talk about some of those type of deficiencies, and maybe there's some guys that have those deficiencies in this draft. But how do you think that this is going to inform the draft? It always happens every year. And, I have some thoughts in my mind, but I'm going to start with Coach first. I'm just kind of curious where your thoughts are.
Well, talent always is number one for me in the draft. It's the best player available. But at the same time, the way Boston is built, I want to give Brad Stevens a lot of credit for this. He built a team, and Tyler, I believe I may have mentioned that to you maybe on DMs or something. But I think the way that Boston is structured is they have these two centerpiece players in Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown, and they're all stars and they're all NBA players. How do I complement my two star players? And I think for teams in the draft, because this draft, I don't think there's any generational players. We've talked about that. There's definitely don't think there's any franchise changing players. This is like the let's go find a fifth starter or a role player kind of draft. And then maybe if you take someone young enough who's like 18, 19, maybe they blossom into something. So I really think it's just finding those complementary pieces to your star players. I think in this draft in particular, not so much next year's draft, but this draft, I think if you were to zero in on some guys that, fit your team culture, I think if you zero in on some guys that fit a particular skill set with your star players or your core, let's just say, I think that would be an effective approach to take.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I hate comparing it to guys that are in the finals because people always overreact. But like, this could be the draft, you find your Derek White for your like the idea of what he is, where it's just that smart player that kind of helps everyone's game blossom, just because of what he can do on the court. I think this is the draft to find those guys. I don't think you're finding the superstar upsides, but I think you're finding what helps you get closer to winning a championship, what helps you closer to being in the playoffs every year. So that's why I think a lot of people are starting to open up about this draft and be like, okay, it's got talent. We always see every draft does have talent, but I still think the guys that are going to go early that have high upside, it just might take a little bit longer for them to find their groove. But there's talent in every draft class. I think we've had 3 All-Stars in every class since 2000. Like at least 3 All-Stars. You can always find talent in the draft. Doesn't have to be, the Victor Wembanyama's or the Giannis Antetokounmpo's. You can always find guys.
Beyond your thoughts?
Yeah, I've always been consistent on this front because I think Brad Stevens just looked at how teams are constructed throughout the years. You need at least 7 two-way players. 7 guys that cannot get played off the floor. If you are fortunate and deep enough, you have 8. And if that's the case, you're going to be, and of course the talent is the talent. But if you have those type of guys with what you expect as far as star players and everything like that, you will put yourself in a position to be always in the hunt. And Brad Stevens has done a good job by identifying players that have those type of skill sets to be able to play both sides of the ball from other teams, be it Derek White, making the deal at the beginning of the season for Drew Holiday, grabbing Porzingis in this case here. And certain guys in this case, even someone like Porzingis, who's not notoriously known for his defense per se, but he's one of those guys that if you put him with the right team, he's going to kind of join the party. He's not a leader guy in this case. That's why when he was in Dallas, he had no one to join the party with. The top dude would barely even look at the play defense. There might some other guys like Hardaway. So he had really guys to join the party with. Now he's got guys that are going to do so. He's like, okay, this is what we're doing. Then I will do so too. There's guys who are just personality or like this. So he's been able to identify that. That's been a long tradition throughout any championship team. You got to have those guys, man. As you further you go, you'll find out which guys are susceptible to get play off the court, be it offensively or defensively. And that's the reason why I look at the draft. When I see a guy as a specialist, for example, as a defensive player, I'm like, I get nervous. Because the first thing I start thinking is, okay, if I'm watching the playoffs, can this guy still be on the floor in a playing game? Can this guy still be on the floor when the high leverage games come up? And I'm sitting there going like, no, he can't. Or vice versa. If a guy is so atrocious on defense because just to flat out be due to size, due to speed, and you're sitting there going like, he ain't gonna get faster and he ain't gonna get bigger. I'm just looking around like, okay, so those are the things that go in my mind a lot of times. So it's a good kind of a jumping off point because I know there's some folks that we want to discuss, but that's what I'm always looking for.
Yeah, I mean, before we get into that, I'll say this. You guys covered it really well. Talked about the depth pieces, talked about two-way players. I'm going to say something that you guys haven't covered. I'm going to focus on the big men. This goes back to a little bit of the 2019 championship when I first had these types of thoughts. I think that you don't necessarily need a top 5 big men in the league, but you need to take the equivalent of a max slot and spread that out through as many diversified skill sets as you can at that spot. I think that that helps a lot in the playoffs, let alone the finals. I haven't seen a traditional back to the basket, or call it more traditional, big man in this. I think the most limited guy is Derek Lively, and he's not necessarily like an old school big man, anyways. So,
Yeah,
I mean,
we talked about this offline, and I think that the kind of add to your point. I
Mhm.
don't even think it's the bigs to your point, but we talk about the front court, but it's also the mobility factor of the big men,
That's
right?
exactly
So, right.
because no one is slow foot. The slowest footed guy is maybe Al Horford, but Al
Right.
Horford is so positionally, and this goes back to the Mark Gasol point for my
Right.
Raptors listeners. Mark Gasol knew where to go. It didn't matter. He was so. I've never seen a big man since then. On the Raptors, I should say. I'm sure that there are in the NBA, but there's very few that are that positionally sound. And he was sure-footed enough to not get caught with his pants down in switches if he ever had to be in switches. But phenomenal defender. Plus, the thing that I noticed about the Celtics specifically, and especially the Celtics, that communication. It's like they become a blob that is just of togetherness. And when you have everyone in sync, where you have the different pieces of the blob moving and shifting all over the court, you know, I'm sure like some sort of Pokemon, like Ditto or something. It becomes a thing of beauty. And that specifically, that takes time to build.
Yes. I just forgot to jump in because Coach brought up Brad Stevens, like what he's done in the front office, and you guys were talking about him, and I was like, I haven't been able to talk about Brad Stevens as a front office guy with anyone, so I have to talk about it. It's been incredible the job he's done since transitioning there. Like I've been as a Celtics fan, but just as someone who loves the draft, always wanted to be a GM, so I'm always just fascinated how they are thinking and looking into it. And every move he's made has been just so impressive because it's calculated. It's, he looks at the previous years, like when they lost to the Warriors, he's looked at that team and said, okay, we're ISO heavy in the fourth quarter. We don't have other options unless it's our two guys. Like, what do we do to help out? And then he looks down the road. He says, well, Porzingis, healthy, gives us a huge dynamic weapon where you can post up. Like he had that year where he was just a dangerous post up, one of the best in the league, like in terms of putting him on the block. Like he's a huge guy. So, and everyone's like, well, can he stay healthy? Yep. But that's a gamble that if it works out, this is why you're in the finals. And then listening to him talk about, just the trying to get more balance and trying to find the right pieces and making the trade for Derek White, which at the time people were like, they're giving up a first round unprotected for him. And it's like, it looks really, really good right now. And then I heard him once when he was coaching the Celtics, he said he went into Danny Ainge's office. He's like, I probably went in once a month and was like, how do we get Drew Holiday? He's like, just how do we get him on this team? I think Danny Ainge would be like, yeah, I'd love to get Drew Holiday, but it's impossible. So, he became available and you just saw where we need him. We're getting him. So it's been really cool. I like when GMs build through the draft, but I also like when how can I bring out the best of my stars? Like we have two guys here. How can I make their lives better? What are their weaknesses and how can I find a more of a balance? And Boston's been great this year. And I think the last thing about it is he's gotten guys that are buying in. They're buying into being like, I don't have to be the guy. We can win a title here. I'm later in my career, so kind of over myself of being like, oh, I've got to be the guy. I think it's just been really cool, like seeing this team, how they communicate and everything. And it's going to be a very interesting game 5 because it's it's been a team that's really struggled to win. Like we know how teams have to learn how to be a champion. Boston's had plenty of time. I'm ready for them to show that they've learned it, but until they get over that hump, I don't know.
Yeah,
Well, you just said an interesting point there, buy-in. Because you could be Pop, you could be Spoelstra, Joe Mazzulla in this case. You don't have player buy-in, good luck.
Right.
And you mentioned about Porzingis. Porzingis had his best year, I think, last year in Washington. Quite frankly, I remember I was talking with Kenyon last year. I'm like, Kenyon, he's having a really good statistical year, not only from a traditional stat standpoint, but analytically, he's been really good. And then Drew Holiday and Derek White are just what Beyond had said earlier, versatility. I can depend on them to guard people. I can depend on them to score if I need to complement my two best players in Brown and Tatum. I'm just applaud Brad Stevens for the team that they put together, complementing their star players, because that doesn't always work out. We've been through in Toronto with redundancy for 3 years until recently. And we come to realize that redundancy might not be the best method of trying to build a championship when we built one before with no redundancy, just complementary skill sets. But anyway, I just think Brad Stevens, he's done a good job. And Joe Mazzulla's done a good job too. Sometimes it's not easy coaching stars. Sometimes it's not, or when expectations are real high. But that's why they're in that job, to go win.
Yeah, just to try and finish up this point, I guess I'm not sure if Kenyon's got any more to say.
No, go for it, man.
Yeah, I just think Tyler mentioned Ainge in this case here. I'm not trying to pick on Danny Ainge in this case. He's a very good executive in his own right. But one of the things that kind of used to make me prickly with Ainge was, and besides got a bit of this too, is like, hey,
I know where you're going with this.
Yeah,
I know where you're going too.
Exactly. It's like if you don't get the deal, you don't come put out the press release afterwards. Oh, we were about to do this and do that. Why? Like
we almost got AD, Paul George from an age standpoint. We almost got
Chris Paul. We almost got
Dame. We almost got Giannis and SGA.
Right. He goes about his business and just gets the stuff done. Don't say anything. I think one of his strengths, and heard someone mention this on a podcast earlier this week, talking about Stevens, about how I guess I'll refer to it as he's emotionally aware of his environment. And what I mean by that is he knew he can't go any further with that team. He knew it was like, it's done. I can't squeeze any more orange out of this case here, any more juice out of this orange. And he knew which type of coach, when he moved on, is like the ideal type of guy to get the best out of them. Right. And I think him as an executive, actually that skill set is actually better in the front office, because he knows in this case, he's looking at mixed match players like, you know what? I know what these two dudes need in this case here, J and J. This is the type of player that would help them, at this phase of their game. If you look at all the guys around them, for the most part, they're very mature players around them, right? I would say probably Porzingis is growing into it, but I wouldn't say him so much. But Horford, White, Holiday, those guys those are grown men in this case here. They'll get about their business, and they help them to get to the stage that these guys are now about their business. That you could then bring a guy like Porzingis, who's a little more wayward, let's put it this way at times. He can kind of be brought into the group in this case here, and it's all right. And I think he's very good at that. I think to be a very good executive, you have to kind of read the room of who can do what and who can't do what. So it is the complementary thing, but it's not just the skill set on the floor, it's the personalities as well too. I think
one of the things that people don't talk about in terms of coaching is the management of the personalities, the egos in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I'm not saying that everyone has to be Stan Van Gundy, where you're doing two jobs at the same time, but there might be an argument to say more coaches, even those who were part of development staff at one point, they move up almost doing Casey style, and now you're consulting and giving input, because the team usually, from what we've seen, better than some of the executives end up knowing. Right, and you're also a little bit more removed in some ways, but then closer as a really good coach to be able to know what personalities work, how to push a guy, or sometimes you pull back, or whatever it has to be. There's a conversation about Nurse. There's also a conversation about Masai. Beyond, I'll give you the final word on this topic, and then we'll move on, because I'd love to discuss this one day.
Yeah, I just want to give props to my man out there in Dallas, Nico Harrison, because I think he's done a fantastic job. Yep. He's kind of following a similar blueprint. for all you guys in this case, like to do the analytics stuff in the analytics language in this case here, he found distressed assets. Let's put it this way. See, I can play the game too. He found like PJ Washington and stuff like that, and Gafford. He said, hey, what the heck? He did like Brad Stevens too. I'll find some sucker in this case with some bad teams, got some pretty good players, I think, and I'll pick them off in this case too. And he also found ways to compliment his top dog as well too, because Dallas, let's face it, man, I'm a Mavericks fan, but we were pretty soft like Jello, man. I'm sorry. We didn't have a lot of dogs in the house. And he got us some dogs now. Okay, we got some. He drafted Lively. He barks. He drafted PJ. He about that business. Gafford. He about that business. You see, we got some guys now where it's like, okay, we can get rolled over anymore, man. No disrespect to some of the guys we had here, and some of them still on the team. I ain't trying to disrespect anybody in this case here. No one's gonna play for our national team, but in this case here, those guys ain't built for that, and there's nothing wrong with that. But for this team, they needed some guys like that. That's all. So. To you, sir. Back to you, Kenny.
So, I mean, that just brings us full circle. I mean, we asked about, some of the things that are going to inform the next year, well, this year's draft, but also just next year's team building in general that is to come. Here's the thing, though. I think we need to kind of go full circle, go back to Masai's comments, and just talk about what he said that they need, and then turn it to the expert here to basically say, is that in somewhat of an abundance in this draft? So Masai said we need, and I always joke about this, but it's true. He said we need a lot of things, but he started off by saying we need, a backcourt initiator or a point guard initiation, at least off the bench. Number two, from a Raptors standpoint, that we also need front court depth. He didn't specify forward or center, but either way, we won't complain. The other thing is that wing defender. So out of those three, what do you think is of most abundance at number 19 and 31? Because, by the way, Raptors fans, in case you, again, are waking up from a coma, we conveyed the pick.
19 and 31. Pretty much all of it. That's why we've been pretty excited about at NoCeilings, and we've been pumping. Everyone's been down on this year, and it's like, no, if you need that, if you need depth, if you need roster construction, like finding the pieces. We just talked about two teams that have been very, very impressive with understanding what they need and being aggressive on the trade market to get it. Dallas, Nico Harrison's done a fantastic job. Brad Stevens done a great job. There's a reason why they're playing still, and it's a process that doesn't come together all at once. I mean, you have to make moves. You have to build through the draft. You have to see the trade market. And I think this is the year where you find those guys. You can get PJ Washingtons. You can get Daniel Gaffords. You can get, I'm not saying Drew Holiday because I love him, but you could get guys that are going to come in and help and put everything together. So that's why I think you even hear that some executives are getting excited about this draft because they're realizing, hey, we're not picking early, and that's fantastic because there's going to be some good talent down the board to help out your rotation and have some upside too. So I think, bigs, I like a lot of the bigs this year because I think there's a different flavor. Like whatever flavor you want this year, you can find it. If you want athleticism, if you want defensive minded, if you want toughness, if you want, some bigs that can step out and shoot the three ball, there's a little bit of everything. And that's why I'm pretty excited about the big class, but I'm also excited about a lot of these other positions that you can look to target. So I can never figure out what the Raptors want. So Masai's comments have me even more confused.
I can't either.
I was like, is he about to just say he also needs like a 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5? Like, because I was like, geez, you're really.
I mean, soon he might say we need a GM too.
No.
You never know these days.
I like Masai. He swings, but I've liked, when I was like seriously like trying to track of like all the track record and guys like Masai made some moves. I was like, man, that was a nice move. Like, and when you're doing it for so long, you're going to miss, and everyone remembers the misses. And, but I think he's also aggressive. Like he's open-minded to be like, I'm swinging a little bit here. Like, I still like Scotty, but I also think you get to a point where you start realizing, okay, the way I wanted to build around this guy isn't the way I need to keep going. Like now I got to get creative and think of maybe a different way in which it can work. So
Well,
I think the good GMs adjust. They can.
That's just it. Because I think what happens sometimes is some GMs become a victim of their own success. We don't have to have a whole full blown thing about this because I want to get into the big conversation soon. But I think that when you've done certain things, for example, Messiah had a tendency to wait people out and then pounce and take advantage. The NBA moves faster now. So you almost become a victim of an era and a victim of your own success. Sometimes you need to take a step away from that. Danny Ainge did that, for example.
Yes.
You know, I don't know. Don't worry, Raptors fans. I'm not, chill to the audience, chill to the audience. But, it is interesting. In terms of rankings for the bigs, we're going to play a bit of a game. We're going to give every single person, we've already decided who's going to get what, basically the college shot clock. We're going to go through, and luckily for us, most of these bigs went to college. And so we're going to go through that. We're going to give everyone 30 seconds to give their elevator pitch. And at the end, as a committee, we could both rank the presentations, but also we could rank the overall who actually would be the best pick at potentially at 19 as a big specifically. And then from there, we're going to kind of come to a close for this first segment of the pod. So, I'm going to just outline who we are going to cover. We're going to be covering Kel'el Ware, Zach Edey. For everyone who loves Zach Edey, we're going to be covering Zach Edey today. We're going to be covering Yves Missi. We're going to be covering, you get some time. You get some time. Kyle Filipowski, come on down, step down. DaRon Holmes, step right up here. Okay? Everyone is going to get some time. Oh, that's actually about it. And we're going to go and cover those guys right there. I might be forgetting someone, but, actually, no, that is it. So we're going to rank those guys, pick 19, because realistically, there's some guys that are just not going to be available or way too much of a reach. So without a further ado, how are you guys feeling before we get into this? I actually do have a shot clock. I have a timer. I'm going to tell you when you guys are on the clock. And, Tyler, I don't know if you want the honors or if you want to give the honors away to someone else.
No, I don't want the honors. I want to have the final or say. I just want to set the tone, see what I got to do. Okay. I'm scared you guys are going to bring some heat, and then I'm going to be like, oh man, I got to really, dig deep here.
Okay, Coach, you are up. You're stepping up with your man. That would be DaRon Holmes. So I'm going to start a timer. You're going to be on a 30-second, and I'll tell you when you're done, starting now.
Of our bigs so far, DaRon Holmes is the best scorer of them. He is second in blocks of all the bigs that we have so far. He led our bigs in player efficiency rating, 31.7, really, really high. He has the highest BPM of 12.3, very good. DaRon Holmes has a little bit of, I can play traditional basketball, but I can also space the floor and play this modern basketball as well. So he shot, what did he shoot this year? He shot 38% from three. And at 6'10", that's
you're up in time.
I'm up in time. That's all I got, people.
That's all you got.
Wow. Okay.
Hey.
Oh wow, this is gonna get dangerous,
clock, man.
Elevator pitch.
That wasn't the high school shot clock of 30 seconds.
Let me tell Coach, you got the road whistle, man. You got the road whistle.
You got the road. Sorry, I let you go. I actually let you go a little bit longer too, but
I am the
state game where they had the clock go off a little bit before they started.
I am the Lakers and the Boston Garden in 1986, man. I don't know.
Exactly. Or is it Sacramento at one point? Anyways, Beyond, you're gonna go next, and then we'll come back because Beyond, you're doing two. So you get to pick. Do you want to do Missi first, or do you want to do your favorite Dookie?
All right, here we go.
Okay, so which one?
Missi.
Okay, Missi's first. All right, and we're on.
So, Yves Missi, in this case from Baylor, of course, freshman came out, he's 6'11", 235, 240 pounds. So he's an extremely athletic guy, young, raw, the classic type of Raptor type of pick that, that you guys love in this case here. We can run the floor, finish around the hoop. He gets around 61% from the field. So he's a guy who can finish around there. And he actually, from a rebounding standpoint, he's going to give you about 6 boards from college. We can see that expanding with his role in the Raptors as well, too. He can move. He has great mobility. So he could be a guy in this case that we get in the switches. As time goes on, you can see him as a big that can be getting out in switches as well, too. So he's a
and time.
that was quick.
We'll expand it next year to 45 seconds or something.
Every old school NCAA clock, man. You run that sucker out.
It feels like they call like the 10 or the 8 seconds of the backcourt, and you're like, that was 7. Like that was just like no,
exactly.
Yeah.
Jeez. God.
It's tough. But this is fun though. Tyler, you're doing Kel'el Ware. You're next.
All right.
You're going to be starting right around now.
Okay. Former McDonald's All-American, went to a Pac-12 school, didn't work out, didn't hit the ground running. Transferred to Indiana, turned 20 years old a couple months ago. 7'1" with a 7'5" wingspan, 230 pounds, can shoot the 3-ball, can finish above the rim, good shot blocker. Much improved this year, still has a lot of upside to untap, and character has been very promising talking of late. A lot of versatility, positional versatility, nasty on the defensive side of the ball. That's all I got.
And
I'm
done.
I was like, this guy does this for a living.
And then it slowed down. I was like, this has been an hour.
Exactly.
He's done this before. I don't know why. He's done this before.
I was waiting. I was like, I got nothing. Just tell me it's time.
Yeah. All right. So that could be a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah. No, I was just like, I was too worried. I was trying to get it all. I was like, what's the big parts? But no, you guys were good.
Okay. So I'm going to do Zach Edey now.
Yeah.
Hopefully I do a good job. And so we're going to start right
Come
around.
for you if you don't. Okay.
Yeah,
exactly.
Okay. Do you want me to time you, Kenyon?
Go for it.
You're going to say it's been 30 seconds and you're going to go for like 2 minutes. We're going to be like, that seems a lot longer.
Hold on.
All right, Coach, you tell me when.
Oh, what was it here?
Oh my goodness, that's funny.
Yeah.
It is tougher when you have to do the elevator pitch when you're thinking, okay, what points can you get out as quick as possible that you think that the person will want, right?
Yeah. Okay, is it 30 seconds or 24?
30. I mean, you can make it tougher if you want. This man's going to be an NBA player. So.
Okay, it's 20 seconds. 3.
20 seconds.
30.
Oh, it is 30.
That's 30.
I thought I heard 20.
He's making it tough.
Oh,
I mentioned 20. I was
That
kidding.
Edey is a man.
I was kidding.
Alrighty. 30 seconds in 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, first of all, Canadian. All right, biggest guy in the draft. Okay, biggest wingspan. He had the highest agility drill. Beat even Grady Dick. Okay, yours truly. He is a force of nature, and for Raptors fans, he will sell tickets. I will tell you that right now. He can also do good drop coverage. I'll leave it at that. You know what? He'll sell tickets.
Let's get the PR play with Edey.
Let me tell you, the Edey family might have to look for a new agent pretty soon, right?
Hey, man, I'm cheap. Okay? You get what you pay for. Just remember that.
I'll tell you what, if that pitch was to the owner, you probably got a good fan right there. The owner probably, tickets, huh? You're selling tickets? All right, I'm in.
Exactly. Hey, they jacked up ticket prices. I'm just saying, we got to fill seats. And that was asked about in the presser. So they're like, so we traded Siaka, but you're jacking up the seat prices. Why? Well, this is what the market will bear. Those hedge fund guys, guys in khakis, they'll get you. With that being said, we have one guy left. That's going to be covered by Beyond the Locker Room. It's going to be Kyle Filipowski. You're going to have 30 seconds. Are you ready?
Yeah.
And go.
So Kyle Filipowski, 6'11", almost 250 pounds. So he's giving you good size. He's shown that he can shoot a little bit from distance. It's still work in progress, but there's been some growth there. He's also a very good passer for a big man. He's giving you almost 4 assists a game, scoring 16 points. So he can give you a little inside outside. It'll be a great blend for Darko's offense that wants a lot of movement. Kyle Filipowski could fill that role by hitting cutters with his passing ability and his ability in this case to even score from deep or even the mid range. So I think from that standpoint, I think he could be a good fit for the Raptors. And also, too, I mean, he's got the pedigree coming from Duke. As much as it hates for me to say so, that is a fact.
That's time. Okay. Now, before we go any further, I rate the pitches. I think mine got the worst. I will say this about Edey. In all honesty, I do think that he would be an excellent drop coverage big. I think that he could actually cover, some ground, not in transition defense, but on non-transition defense, more in the half court, just because he is so big. He has actually worked on his speed, although I do think he's a little bit more slower footed. I do think that he actually could potentially be good in certain situations. Are those the situations that the Raptors are going to be in? Well, we're going to let the committee decide. But I think that, would it be the absolute worst? Am I going to be, as some Raptors fans were last year, crying when Grady got, and on the floor when Grady got selected? Absolutely not. So I'll leave it at that. Okay, how are we ranking these guys? Do you guys want to? What do you guys think? Who goes number one?
Okay, I'll go. I think I still like the upside potential Ware. I think of all the guys, to me, I think he has the highest ceiling of all 5. Where the Raptors are, I just can't let that slide, man. It's like, ugh. So I go with him as 1. Honestly, Holmes, your man's growing on me, coach. I think I would move him to 2 at this point. I think he's one of those guys that he can't miss. Even at floor level, you're gonna get something productive from him. So I like that about him. I think the other 3 guys, it gets a little dodgier in this case here, man, because my mindset. I think 3rd, Filipowski, based on the system, would be my 3rd pick, honestly, and 4th would be Missi. 5th being Edey. You know me, I don't like the projects. So sorry, Missi, I'm not waiting around. We've been down that road too many times in Toronto. I'm not waiting around another 3 years for him to be what he might be, and that scares me a little bit. So I have a little bit of separation from the first 2 guys, the other 3 guys.
Coach.
There you go.
I'm probably going with Ware of our bigs right now. Certainly the upside is intriguing. I get it. There are risks with him, but I'm okay with swinging for the fence and going for a home run. And Holmes, I think Holmes is a safe pick for us as well, but his style of game can fit next to Scotty and the core that we have as well. And kind of like what Beyond said, I like Missi. I like the defensive upside with Missi. I like the ability might be able to go on the perimeter and defend, but at the same time, he needs time offensively. And we already got one center who can't shoot. I don't know why I'd want another one who can't shoot. And with Filipowski, once again, a safe pick, I guess, but I kind of wonder just about the upside moving forward. I'd rather take a swing on Ware, or if you want to have a bit of a swing, but also a bit of a safety net, I'm going with Holmes.
And we'll get this in the next discussion, but injuries concern me with Filipowski.
Yeah.
We'll get to that. That's going to come into play in the next discussion. But I don't like guys that get hurt early in the career. I get nervous.
Mr. Rucker, your ranking for you're not Toronto Raptors.
No, come on. I root for every team. I like the Raptors.
Except for the finals.
Yeah, except for the finals. Then all bets are off. That's what I say. I root for everyone until the playoffs start. If my team's in the playoffs, all bets are off. I like Ware a lot for them. And I've kind of done a complete 180 on Ware, like the whole year. I think the biggest thing for me is it really, like, we get really excited about these guys as like incoming freshmen. Sorry, I thought I had something on my face. We get so excited when they're a McDonald's All-American and like, hey, they're going to be a star. They're going to be a top 5 pick. And guys just don't hit the ground running sometimes in their freshman year. They got to figure it out. And he looked good this year. I was skeptical because I was like, that's a very favorable fit for him. They were just letting him do everything. And then he looked, I just kept being more impressed. And I've asked around about him, and everyone's very impressed with his interviews. Like, they just say he's kind of accepted, he's matured. They said he's matured a lot and taken the right steps. And they're like, pleasant surprise. It was a really good interview. And I've heard that a bunch of times, and heard he's looked good in workouts. And I've, some scouts I've talked to have just been like, the expectations his freshman year were not realistic. Like, they were just very heavy, and he didn't live up to it right away. And they're like, that's fine. But I think now he's kind of accepted, just like, got it over himself, like what we were talking about earlier. And I think he's kind of understood what he is now as a player. So you're getting a floor spacer with still really good upside for Toronto. I'd like to get that. I know they like the length there and the defensive specialist, but I want Toronto to get some floor spacing and balance. So I think Ware would be there. Holmes, I love Holmes. So he's a popular name. I think he'd probably be up there too. I think I'd have him at 2. The Edey wild card. I can't have him that high, but I understand if they're going to go swinging. But I also don't like Filipowski. I just would be lower. So I think I could go.
You can put them equal. You can put them equal if you want.
Missi is the one person you haven't mentioned yet.
I'd put probably Missi third there, but I'm with you guys. I don't want that project. And I like him a lot. It's just, I think a team drafting him needs to be patient. And I'm like, Toronto needs to probably get a guy that seems a little bit more further along. So I think I'd probably be Missi and then Edey, Filipowski for me.
So Filipowski's last for you.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I'm with you guys. I don't want to go too deep because I know we're going to talk about it, but the injuries scare me. Missi had a fun day with Filipowski. If you go watch that game, he one guy looked very, very good, and it was not what I was expecting going into that game. And I was kind of like, whoa. So, that's a notable one. And there's just been I've been trying to buy in on Filipowski for 2 years. And I finally got to a point where I was like, I can't do this anymore. But if you get him in the late first round, I would absolutely jump all over that. It's just, I'd like Toronto to go in a couple of different directions if they can.
Right. Yep.
So the way that I kind of rank them is in 2 ways. It's like, for me, I'm like, what's my hope? Who projects? Because everyone said this is how they could be. And if I'm going based on that, I probably mimic Beyond's ranking the most. However, in terms of what we know, who's on the team, in terms of who we know who's running the team, Darko, all that kind of stuff. Darko is not Nick Nurse. He does not coach like Nick Nurse. Nick Nurse, you got to fight for every minute. You got to be ready. Darko ain't like that. So, as much as I like Ware as the number 1 fit, because I think that he has a diversified skill set enough to transcend the length of Darko's tenure. And I say that mainly because most coaches who are developmental coaches, usually these days, they get bumped up to front office roles eventually. And then they bring someone in when they're ready to get serious. So I think, or if you change Darko's system, how it is right now, because I know people said he's a good, I don't think he's the best screen setter personally, but I think he has the ability to be a good screen setter, and that he definitely has the tools to roll, pop, all that kind of stuff. I have to lean against that because of the previous motor issues. I think you see that when at times he could be better on defense. He becomes a 2-footed load up jumper to make up for previous blow-bys. And that there's that discipline. I don't know if that's going to be there with the coach who hasn't mentioned defense in the longest time. And I do think he has upside on defense for sure, as well as on offense. For that reason, DaRon Holmes gets number 1 for me. Number 2, I would put Missi. I know it's going to take some time, I know that there's a ton of Raptors fans that don't care. They would be happy. They say, this is a Masai guy. Cool. I also think, though, he does something different than the centers that you have. Kelly Olynyk is not a center. He's a power forward. Samson Folk said it himself. He said, statistically speaking, and eye test, that is the worst center defense that I've ever seen to end the year.
People think he's a center?
We played him as center.
We played him as a center.
They knew what they were doing when they did that.
I didn't think he was a center.
I was
I don't think
approving
these
the
two
pick.
thought he was a center. But, you know, yeah, it's, you know, not some people are basketball fans and some people are fans of teams. And
No,
fans of
I get
teams- Yeah, you get it. And it's not his fault. I mean, the other guy was betting on himself. So, and that didn't quite work out. So, for that reason, I think the remainder, I think I did 3. So there's 2 remaining. I would put Filipowski last as well. I think he's too close to a guy that I just talked about. I don't know if Filipowski is a center either at the big club. I think when he worked best, if I'm not mistaken, you correct me if I'm wrong, he was next to Lively, who was a center.
Yeah.
So
It's fun how that works out. You know, it also hides a lot of stuff when you start realizing one guy might have helped the other guy a lot more than it was the other way. And I think initially at one point last year, people thought it was the other way around. People thought it was Filipowski kind of, you know, bringing out the best of Lively, when I think it might have been Lively was starting to find his groove and really, like, he was at the end of the year was fantastic compared to the beginning of the year. So it's always interesting.
Yeah,
it's just tough with Filipowski. And I like that you were high on Missi, because I get it. He's what you'd want if you're getting a raw ball of clay for a center.
there's no motor questions ever.
No.
And it's like he's that Energizer bunny. I do think processing wise, he needs to catch up a little bit. But there's the typical, you know, he's only been playing since XYZ. So I get it, and that's something that I factored into my ranking. But my heart tells me where. So I'll just say that.
I would love to see Missi go back to college for one more year. Really develop one more year. I know I get it next year. He's not going to go probably in the top 3, 4. Like, if he went back to college, he still could have been in that top 10 range probably, but he'd have another year of development. But that's just me. I understand coming out in this draft too at the same time, because it's.
Yeah, I think I agree there with you. I think there was just another level to reach for him for sure. I also think he just had momentum and was like ready to go. So I get it. He just has some. That's where we were talking about, like, roster construction earlier. You know, that's where it comes into play of, okay, what do you have working already alongside? Do you just need that Derek Lively type of presence where it's like play good defense and rebound and finish lobs? Missi might make some sense then, because he's got a great frame. I saw him before the season started at Nike Hoop Summit, and I was like, "Who's this kid?" Like, he just was humongous. I was like, "This kid's 18? Like, what?" He just was really young. That when I saw him, and I was like, "Okay, he's probably going to need a couple years," but this looks like. In my head, I was like, "Finally, Baylor got a big guy to work with," because I was like, they always have good guards and they have no bigs. And then I thought he overachieved this year. I thought he just showed that he was way further in his development than I thought seeing then. So. He's fun. It's just, it might take a little bit of time to come around, but could he be like a DeAndre Jordan presence where you're just like, hey, he's not an offensive weapon, but he's a very nice center to have? Maybe, but I don't know.
Now, before we end off this portion of the podcast, I'm just going to ask you a really simple question about Ware, and that's, is it possible for him to be morphed into a 4? Does he have the foot speed for that? Because he in you know, coming up in high school, he kind of played more differently, and I think that's where his skill set kind of grew.
Yeah, my problem is I want the game to go back to that like too big thing. I loved when it was just like big, like center power forward. I was like, that's fun. Now we're just fascinated with small ball, and it's like, well, can we get the guy to go back to old school?
I think it's quietly gone back, though.
That's what I'm saying. I think Minnesota started
yeah.
start when they made that trade. I was like, oh gosh, they're gonna do it. They're gonna bring it back. It's gonna be fantastic. Right. And I think we're starting to go back that way. I think it could be a lineup versatility, because now you're trying to figure out, like, could we have different lineups? Can we throw different stuff out there that makes our team unique, gives other teams headaches?
That's why I think he's interesting mess around at 4, right? Like as a 4, potentially. I don't know, but as a 4, he's interesting. He has the size to play the 5, I think. But like, if you could play him with another big, right? Like hypothetically, him with Wemby would be really interesting.
For sure. I mean, it'd be fantastic. If I'm playing him with a 4, I'd want some muscle with him, because I'd want him to be like, hey, you on the perimeter, we got like a hard-nosed rebounder inside that could also help out. You know, I had talked to a scout, and I was like, what's up with Ware? And Ware's look great. He said, I'll get work. And then he's like, Lively's making him a lot of noise right now, because he's just said, like, everyone's watching Lively, and NBA is a copycat league. And he said, Ware's getting hot at the perfect time. So I think teams are warming up to him. I think he's had a great process. And that's where I think if you were a team like that, you could be like, hey, might work at the 4. We might have also a 5 that stretches the floor, open things up. So that's where teams start getting like, oh, well, we can do a lot of stuff with him if everything's going to work out. And it'd be interesting. I just would like him with Toronto. I feel like he checks a lot of boxes that Masai coveted. And, you know, this is a high upside guy still that we just haven't been buzzing too much about, but there's a lot of tools to work with. And I think the motor questions going back to last year have kind of watered down a little bit from what I feel like I'm taking back, and we'll see. But I think he had a good year. He had a very, very good year. Like, he had some games where I was like, and then the next game I was like, that's a great bounce back game. Like, you woke up, and I just like him a lot for a lot of teams in that range, but I think Toronto would be a great landing spot.
Absolutely. We're going to take a break right there. Folks, like, comment, subscribe, and stay tuned for the next episode that's going to be coming out fairly soon for you.